Why are there 2 wine glasses in the sink when I was out appraising in Savannah for 3 days? That was the question I didn't mean to ask, but couldn't hold back. Her face twitched. A beat too long. A smile too fast. My wife said she had a headache and shuffled to bed without answering. That night, I didn't sleep. Because the next morning, I'd find a receipt inside a 19th century roll-top desk, and everything would spiral from there. Let me take you back. I'm Theo Durand, 42, third-generation antique appraiser. Grew up in a clapboard house behind my grandfather's old shop, Durand and Sons Appraisal, in Asheville, North Carolina. My life? Stubbornly analog in a digital world. Brass magnifiers. Cotton gloves. A deep affection for things with history. I married Mara, a gallery curator with an eye for modern pieces, steel sculptures, angular light. We joked that I loved the past and she loved the future. We didn't always click, but we balanced. Or I thought we did. Our routine had rhythm. I'd be out on appraisal trips across the Southeast, historic homes, estate sales, restoration consults. Mara ran exhibits and local arts festivals. We rarely fought. We rarely talked, if I'm honest. But I thought we were content. Comfortable. Then came that first misstep. A subtle crack. It was the weekend I'd been away for a private collection in Savannah. 18 hours cataloging silver snuff boxes and colonial oil lamps. When I came home Sunday night, tired, dusty, craving leftover gumbo, there were 2 wine glasses in the sink. One still had a ring of red in it. We don't drink red. Not at home. And Mara's favorite? Sauvignon Blanc. Did you have company? I asked, casual as I could manage. She froze. Just for a blink. Then too cheerful. Oh. Hannah came by. We opened a bottle after the festival. I nodded, but it thudded wrong in my gut. Hannah doesn't drink. She's sober 3 years now. I knew that because we threw her a quiet celebration last fall with sparkling cider. But I said nothing. That's the first rule of denial. Don't test the thread too soon. It'll snap, and you won't be ready. Tuesday morning, I headed into the shop early. We just received a batch from a decedent's estate out in Black Mountain, boxes of ornate desks, steamer trunks, ceramic pipes. I love this work. You can tell a person's story by their objects. Whether they treasured showpieces or hidden compartments. Whether they locked things up or let things be found. That's when it started. In the third drawer of a mahogany roll top, I found it, a folded receipt from Oakwood Vineyards, dated 2 nights ago. 2 glasses, 1 bottle. Candlelight tasting for 2. It was scribbled in Mara's looping cursive. He won't be back until Sunday. XO.M. I just sat there, reading it again and again. My heartbeat wasn't angry, it was mechanical, pounding like a hammer in the walls. I felt sick. Not because of what it meant, but because she left it. She knew I'd be the one cataloging that desk. Did she want me to find it? That night, I didn't confront her. I sat across the dinner table, spooning squash soup into my mouth like I wasn't falling through an invisible floor. She talked about some installation at the local college. I heard none of it. I watched her lips move and tried to imagine who else had kissed them, who she'd poured wine for, laughed with. I kept thinking about that receipt. He won't be back until Sunday. She wrote it like I was a prop, like I was background. After dinner, I said I had to go back to the shop for inventory. I stayed until midnight, pacing, thinking, and then I started looking. Not in the desperate way, not yet. But I opened our joint iPad, left casually on the side table. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. What I did find was her browser history, Asheville boutique hotels with jacuzzis, best red wines for date night, and how to delete iMessages. Only she hadn't deleted them yet. Not all of them. There was one chat still open on iCloud. You make me feel like I'm still alive. Like I'm not just someone's wife. The reply came from a contact named Ben, gallery installer. You are. You're magic. I keep thinking about Friday. The bath. You. Everything. I shut the iPad. Walked outside. It had started to rain. I let it hit me. Ben. I knew Ben. He was the guy who helped install the suspended kinetic sculpture Mara was raving about last month. Young, maybe 28. Man bun. Sleek boots. Always smelled like lemongrass and sawdust. He once asked me if I'd ever seen the Danish mortise lock technique up close. I had. On a cabinet I repaired after my father's death. And now, apparently, he was inside my wife. I didn't go home that night. The next few days, I played normal. Perfectly so. I kissed her cheek in the mornings. I responded to her texts. I even brought her a lavender muffin from the bakery downtown. the one she used to love. She smiled like everything was fine. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was watching shadows. Details. I started logging timestamps. Noting excuses. She said she had a board meeting on Thursday. I drove by the gallery. Her car wasn't there. I checked our shared calendar. I found a recurring note blocked out as wellness hour. Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Wellness, huh? So the following Thursday, I followed her. She left the house in yoga pants and a turquoise windbreaker. Drove off like she was headed to Pilates. I stayed back a few minutes, then trailed her in my truck. She didn't go to a gym. She pulled into the Woodmere Inn, a boutique hotel on the edge of town with a vintage clawfoot tub in every room. I watched her greet someone at the door. A man. Tall. Flannel shirt. Tattoo on the forearm. Then, they kissed. Not hurried. Not guilty. A long, deep kiss like they were in a private movie only they could see. And just like that, they disappeared inside. I sat in the truck for 2 hours. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I just stared at the entrance. At the vine-covered archway and the flickering gas lamp out front. It felt staged. Like I was outside a theater, watching someone else's play. Except that was my wife. And I was the ghost in the audience. I drove home before they came out. Mara arrived hours later. Claimed she'd been at a hot stone therapy class. Even mind how sore her back was. I nodded. Said I'd try it sometime. And that night, I started planning. Not revenge. Not yet. I just needed truth. All of it. That weekend, I called in a favor from a friend of mine, Lexi, a retired private investigator who once hired me to appraise a Spanish doubloon from a shipwreck case. I told her I had a problem. She didn't ask questions. Just said, give me a week. In the meantime, I started combing through the financials. Not out of paranoia, but instinct. When your life's work is about detecting fakes and tracing provenance, betrayal leaves a scent. I found something. 2 months ago, Mara transferred $4,300 from our joint account into a private checking account under her maiden name. It was disguised as a donation to a local arts nonprofit. Except that nonprofit closed last year. The final nail came 3 days later. Lexi sent me a file folder wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside, 31 photos of Mara and Ben entering hotels, exiting restaurants, holding hands in her car. A copy of a short-term lease she'd signed under a fake name for emergencies. A scant copy of a letter Mara had written to a divorce lawyer, dated before I found the wine glass. I stood there in my office, looking at a woman I no longer recognized. Her smile in those photos looked real. Not forced, not performative. And that hurt worse than everything. She wasn't making a mistake. She was making a choice. When you spend your life studying the hidden value of things, you learn how to take them apart before you put them on display. That's what I was doing now, disassembling my marriage like a misdated French armoire. Quietly, carefully, without alerting the collector. Because the one thing Mara didn't realize? I was never going to confront her head-on. I was going to appraise her soul, piece by piece. And when I was done, she wouldn't recognize the man she left behind. Let's keep going. I spent the next 4 days living like a curator of my own pain. Polite. Present. Watching. Each morning, I made Mara coffee. I asked about her gallery installs. I let her laugh, touch my hand, pretend we were still us. And each night, when she went to sleep, I scanned her world. Lexi's file told me enough to start planning phase 1, preservation. See, with antiques, the first rule is always protect the item before restoration. Keep the veneer from cracking further. That's what I did with my marriage, sealed it in stillness. Because the second Mara suspected I knew, she'd flee or go nuclear. I needed her calm, predictable, distracted. So I smiled. And I plotted. Phase 1, digital forensics. I created a full backup of our shared cloud account. Used a third-party recovery tool to extract deleted messages. The iPad Mara thought she'd wiped? It still carried echoes. One string of messages stood out. Her and Ben, after a gallery launch party. Ben, you looked stunning tonight. I couldn't stop staring. Mara, you made me feel like the only person in the room. Not like furniture. That line landed like a nail in my sternum. Furniture. That's what I'd become to her. Not a man. Not a partner. A chair to walk past. A thing to decorate her life, not build it with. Phase 2. Financial prep. I opened a new checking account under the name of my appraisal LLC. Moved small sums from our joint account, nothing noticeable. Sold one of my personal vintage typewriters to a collector in Raleigh. Cashed out a crypto wallet I'd forgotten I owned. It all added up to just under $14,000. Then I hired a divorce attorney. Quietly. Met him in the back office of a bookstore cafe just 2 blocks from our shop. His name was Kenton Reese, and he specialized in high-asset deception cases. "Do you want the house?" he asked after reviewing Lexi's file. "I want the truth," I said. "And I want to leave her nothing she can lie about." Phase 3. The emotional ledger. This was the hardest part. I started writing things down. Not as evidence, but to remember who I was. Before the affair. Before the rot set in. Mara had rewritten the narrative in her head. I could see it in her eyes. She already considered herself the one who had outgrown me. So I made a ledger, every sacrifice, every moment of joy I'd given her freely. The trip to Paris on our 10th anniversary, paid for by selling one of my rarest coin collections. The basement gallery I built by hand during COVID so she could keep hosting private viewings. The night I held her after her father died, even when she sobbed that she wanted to be alone, because I knew she didn't mean it. None of those things were antique, but they were valuable. And soon, they'd be mine again, unburdened by her betrayal. It was Friday night when I made my first move. Subtle. Surgical. We were at a small dinner party hosted by her friend Celeste, another gallery manager, known for her risottos and performative Instagram toasts. There were 8 of us. Couples. Laughs. Candlelight. Ben was there. Of course he was. He stayed across the room from me, like a fox watching a closed chicken coop. Mara played it cool, too cool. Not one glance. Not one word too warm. But I could feel the static between them like ozone. I waited until the second bottle of candy. Then I brought up the sculpture drop. "You know," I said, swirling my glass, "one of the wall mounts was misaligned on that kinetic piece last month. Gallery nearly lost $30,000 when the wind shifted." Mara blinked. Froze. Ben turned white. I looked straight at him. But whoever installed it. Real pro. Invisible touch. Like he was never there at all. A single beat. Then I turned away. That night, Mara barely spoke on the drive home. I could feel her trying to replay the moment. Trying to decode whether I knew. I slept soundly. She didn't. The next morning, she left early, claimed she had an artist brunch. I didn't follow her this time. I didn't need to. I had access to her location history now. Lexi had cloned her GPS metadata from the iPad. I watched the blue dot move not toward a gallery, but toward a hiking trail outside Weaverville. A secluded one. No cell towers. I logged the location. Took screenshots. Filed it under Later. Phase 4. Public repositioning. I started showing up more. At community events. Charity auctions. Even the university's antique book fair, where I gave a short lecture on detecting forgeries and leather binding. I smiled more. Wore tailored jackets instead of my usual flannels. Word started circling. "Theo looks good lately. He's out more. Did he get a haircut? Is he single?" I wasn't flirting, but I wasn't invisible anymore. And Mara noticed. That Sunday, she came home early from inventory day. Found me in the kitchen, laughing with Evie, a local historian who dropped off a Civil War diary for authentication. Evie's tall, red-haired, sharp-tongued. Nothing like Mara. After Evie left, Mara leaned on the counter, eyes scanning my face. "You're different lately," she said. "Am I?" I replied, not looking up. "You've been busy." I smiled. "Work's picked up. People want the truth again." She didn't respond. She just nodded. Quiet. Like the ghost of suspicion had returned to haunt her this time. That night, I laid the groundwork for the final blow. I updated Kenton, my lawyer, with everything. He nodded across the table. "She's slipping. You've got enough." I didn't ask what that meant yet. Not until I saw it on paper. Because now we were entering Phase 5, the controlled burn. It began with a phone call. I called my cousin Ray, who runs an estate cleanout service. Told him I needed to prep the house for a possible transition. He knew not to ask. Then I filed a quiet motion with the county clerk to freeze the remaining joint assets pending legal separation due to suspected dissipation of funds. That Friday, Mara came home to find half our closet empty. Just mine. My side, packed, sorted, gone. The rest of the house? Completely untouched. She found me in the den, cataloging a collection of 10 advertising signs for a client. "What the hell is going on?" she said, breath hitched. I looked up. Calm. "I'm leaving next week. The lawyer will send the papers." Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "Wait. What? What are you talking about? What lawyer?" "Don't worry," I said. I left the ledger on the dining table. She blinked. "Ledger? I pointed toward the antique book I'd placed there. Inside, the printed texts, the photos, the receipts, the chat logs. Every artifact of her deception curated like a gallery exhibit. And one note, taped to the inside cover. You should have known not to leave evidence in a desk. I'd be the one to open. She started crying then. Not sobbing, just leaking. Like something broke inside. I walked past her, grabbed my coat. You don't get to cry first, I said. And I left the house she thought I'd never walk away from. It's one thing to catch someone in a lie. It's another to trace the lie back to its source and realize you were never even the story's main character. I thought this was about infidelity. A guy. A fling. But the further I looked, the more I saw it. Mara had been rewriting our past long before she touched Ben. The affair wasn't the start of her betrayal. It was just the latest chapter. And I was done being a footnote. Let's pick up there. I moved out on a Monday. Rented a one-bedroom loft above a bakery on Lexington Avenue. Exposed brick, old copper pipes, warped pine floors, exactly the kind of place that feels honest. It smelled like cinnamon rolls in the morning and quiet at night. Mara didn't follow. Didn't call. She signed the divorce papers without contest. Too fast, even. Almost like she was relieved. But I couldn't let go without understanding the why. So I dug deeper. Because provenance, origin, is everything in my world. A Ming vase without history is just pottery. A betrayal without context is just noise. I wanted to know when I became furniture to her. And the answer turned out to be years old. Lexi helped me track down an old contact of Mara's, Russell, a painter she once curated back in Raleigh before we moved to Asheville. He had nothing to lose, and apparently no loyalty to her. We met at a bar. He was drunk by the time I got there. Look, he said, wiping his beard with a cocktail napkin, Mara's brilliant. But she's always needed a spotlight. If no one's applauding, she sets fire to something just to get people looking again. What does that mean? It means she got bored of being loved. She needed to feel chased. He looked at me, eyes glassy. You didn't chase her, Theo. You trusted her. She never knew what to do with that. I sat in my truck for an hour after that, remembering the time I surprised her with a rooftop dinner on our 5th anniversary, and she didn't cry or squeal. She just said, "This is a lot." Or the time I fixed her mother's antique brooch and she left it in a drawer for 2 years. Or when I offered to collaborate on an art history podcast with her, and she said, "I don't think we need more overlap. Let's keep our lanes." I thought I was respecting her space. Turns out, I was giving her a stage and stepping into the wings. 2 days later, I got a call from Evie, the historian who dropped by my shop. She invited me to speak at a local university panel on emotional resonance in historical artifacts. Fancy phrase, but really just an excuse to talk about how people assign meaning to things after loss. I almost said no, but I went. And something changed. Halfway through the panel, a student asked if I'd ever had to appraise an item that turned out to be a fake after someone believed it was priceless. I paused, then said, "All the time. Sometimes people cling to a lie because it gives their story structure. But the truth? The truth frees you to tell a new one." I didn't mean it as a metaphor, but the way Evie looked at me from across the panel table, it landed as one. Later that night, she invited me to a small exhibit she was curating, a private collection of family letters from the 1800s, most never shown before. I stayed late. We talked, walked, shared a drink on a bench near the Pack Square fountain. She didn't flirt. She just listened. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a background prop. I felt real. Meanwhile, the divorce moved fast. Too fast. I knew Mara was up to something when she agreed to a clean split, including the house, without negotiation. The woman who once haggled over antique vases at estate sales was giving up property equity without a word. Didn't track. Lexi found it 2 days later. Mara had been approached to be the creative director for a major West Coast arts nonprofit, with relocation expenses and a condo included. She needed a fast divorce to look clean, marketable, independent, visionary, freshly single. She wasn't running from the wreckage. She was launching from it, using me as her launch pad. So I made a decision, not to sabotage her, not to beg, but to tell my version of the story before she could rewrite it for the world. I called a local arts reporter I'd worked with years ago, Jasmine Cortez, sharp-eyed, straight shooter, loved covering the overlap of historical preservation and modern scandal. I told her everything, not in anger, just with facts, receipts, messages, dates. And I framed it all through one lens, emotional provenance. The feature dropped 2 weeks later. Betrayal in the Gallery, the quiet collapse of Asheville's arts power couple. No names were dragged. No curses. No venom. Just a quiet, devastating portrait of what happens when one person curates love like it's an exhibit, and the other builds it like a home. Mara called that night. I let it ring. Then I picked up on the 5th ring. You blindsided me, she said, voice low, flat. No. I catalogued you. You had no right. I had every right. You made our marriage public the second you made our affair a pattern. Silence. Then, did you do this to hurt me? No. I did it to stop lying about who you are. She hung up. That was the last time we spoke. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. People came forward. Quiet messages. Emails. A widow who read the article and brought in her late husband's compass to have it appraised. A young woman who said, my boyfriend gaslit me for 2 years. Your story helped me leave. Even Ben reached out. Just once. He sent a DM. I didn't know how much damage we were doing. She said you were cold. Distant. I believed her. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve an appraisal. They belong in the discard pile. By the end of the month, the gallery issued a quiet statement. Mara had declined the West Coast role. Rumor was, the board felt the press might complicate public relations. She stayed in Asheville. Moved into a rented cottage in the hills. Word is, she's trying to rebrand as a solo consultant. I wish her luck. But more than that, I wish her silence. As for me, I rebuilt. The shop stayed mine. The name stayed on the door. But I added a new tagline under the logo. Every piece tells the truth. I've had more clients than ever. People trust a man who's been lied to. Strange but true. They think I see things now, cracks, stress lines, restoration points. And I do. Evie and I never officially dated. But we've shared more than one slow night, passing bourbon between us while we decipher old love letters from soldiers and seamstresses long gone. Sometimes I read her the painful ones. The confessions. The regrets. She always listens. Sometimes that's all you need. I once told a student, provenance is more than origin. It's about chain of ownership. Who held the object? Who left fingerprints? Who left cracks? My marriage? It was an exhibit now. And the final piece? That was going on display in front of everyone. Not out of vengeance, but to restore truth to the gallery of my life. Here's how it ended. 2 months after the article dropped, Mara's face returned to my world, not in person, but on flyers downtown. She was curating a new exhibit. Reclaiming Form, Women and the Fragmented Self, held at the Asheville Center for Modern Art. Opening night. Wine. Press. Velvet ropes. It was her bid for redemption. And from the outside, it looked flawless. She'd lined up a few powerful sponsors, convinced the local art scene she was bold for weathering a public breakup and still producing visionary work. She was trying to paint herself as a phoenix. But phoenixes don't rise from ashes, they lit themselves. So I made a choice. I RSVP'd. The night of the exhibit, I wore my grandfather's watch. A subtle nod to legacy. The kind of artifact with meaning. Evie offered to come with me. Not as a date, just as someone who understood restoration. I said yes. We walked in together. Mara was across the gallery, dressed in all black, sipping from a glass she never really drank. She saw me. Didn't smile. Didn't scowl. Just acknowledged. The crowd was thick, local press, donors, some of the same people who'd toasted her and Ben at those cozy little gatherings last year. Some nodded politely at me. Others looked away. The walls were lined with sculptures, fractured glass, twisted copper, broken ceramics reassembled into sharp new forms. It was well done, until I saw the centerpiece. In the middle of the room stood a mirrored installation titled, Unreliable Narrator. It was shaped like an open book, with jagged pages made from fragmented vanity mirrors. In the center was a handwritten quote etched into aluminum. We only remember what serves us. MD. MD. Mara Durand. Her initials. She wasn't just curating the show. She was making herself the thesis. Framed as the fractured woman, misunderstood, reinvented. I stared at it for a long time. Then I stepped away, to the small guest registry table near the gallery's back wall. There was a notebook, a pen. I signed my name. Then below it, I wrote, "We also forget what incriminates us. TD." And I left. 3 days later, a young reporter from the Citizen Times reached out. She'd noticed both quotes and connected the dots. Wanted to do a follow-up piece. I declined the interview, but I gave her a statement. Art doesn't absolve. It reveals. When you use it to hide the truth, it's no longer art. It's propaganda. She published the quote. Didn't even need my full name. It landed hard, because right after that, the gallery quietly pulled the exhibit's funding. Not because of scandal, but because one of Mara's sponsors found out about the Ben situation. Turns out, the foundation board member was Ben's ex-fiance's cousin. Small town. Bad luck. Or maybe justice. Mara went quiet after that. She kept the cottage in the hills. Taught the occasional online class. But the curator circuit? She'd burned too many bridges. Too quickly. The girl who set fire to feel seen had finally watched it all turn to smoke. Meanwhile, I made my own choice about what kind of man I'd be post-betrayal. I sold the house. Not for profit. For peace. It was a beautiful craftsman with too many ghosts. Every window whispered her name. Every floorboard remembered a lie. I took the proceeds and bought a small farmhouse outside Marshall, 20 minutes north of Asheville. It sits on 3 acres. Has a barn. A broken-down Model A Ford in the back I might fix someday. I built my new life with slow hands. The same way I'd restore a water-damaged map or a rusted compass. Bit by bit, I started mentoring a few local kids who wanted to get into appraisal work. Not because they loved antiques, but because they were drawn to stories. That made me proud. Evie and I never became a thing, exactly. We kissed once. Slow. Honest. On my porch in the middle of a thunderstorm. Then we sat in silence for an hour, listening to the rain, neither of us pretending it meant forever. She travels now, consults in New Orleans, Savannah, sometimes D.C. We send postcards to each other. I don't know what it is between us, but it's more real than most things I've known. Sometimes that's enough. Last week, I finished a piece I'd been working on for months. A personal essay titled The Ledger Didn't Lie. Not for publication, just for me. A full accounting, not of Mara, not of the betrayal, but of my own value. My mistakes, my blind spots, my worth. I wrote one line near the end that I think might be the most honest thing I've ever said. You can't appraise love while you're still in it. The light skews. The angles lie. You have to step away, let the dust settle, and only then can you see what was real and what never was. Sometimes I think about the man I was, standing over a wine glass in the sink, not knowing it was the first breadcrumb of collapse. He didn't deserve what happened, but he needed it. Because without the fall, he never would have learned to stand alone again. Not as an exhibit. Not as someone's sentimental keepsake. But as a man. Whole. Restored. And not for sale.